It began on what seemed like an ordinary morning in Santa Monica. A billionaire, known for his empire of glass towers and boardrooms, suddenly found himself standing in a public park, staring at three children who carried his same green eyes. What followed wasn't another business deal or headline-making merger. It was something far more personal, a story of second chances, healing, and what happens when love unexpectedly returns in the form of family. Nathan Brooks wasn't just any billionaire. He was the kind of man magazines wrote features about, the sort whose name floated around in conversations about influence and innovation. He had clawed his way to the top, built companies from scratch, and turned every challenge into a victory. But none of those glossy articles mentioned the one failure that mattered most, the collapse of his relationship with Destiny Williams. Destiny had once been his anchor, the woman who had known him before the headlines, before the money hardened his focus. Their love had been young and fierce, but it didn't survive the relentless grind of Nathan's ambition. She walked away quietly, and he convinced himself that losing her was the price of greatness. Years later, sitting in his marble kitchen, surrounded by awards that meant less than nothing, he realized he had lost more than love. He had lost a chance at family. When Destiny reached out, it wasn't to rekindle anything between them. It was about the triplets Caleb, Cameron, and Chloe, three children, who bore his blood but not his memories. They were toddlers now, at the age where personalities begin to bloom, and he had missed every laugh, every first word, every stumble into the world. The news shook him more than any market crash ever could. Suddenly, the image of his empire felt like a house built on sand. He begged Destiny for a chance. She was calm but firm. If he wanted to step in, it wasn't for show. He had to be all in, not the visitor who breezed in with gifts and left when it was inconvenient. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about them. Nathan listened, for once not with the instinct to argue, but with the quiet fear of a man who realized the stakes were higher than he'd ever faced. 2 weeks later, he stood in front of the Santa Monica Park. The air smelled of sunscreen and cut grass, the kind of ordinary Saturday morning he'd never experienced. For a man used to helicopters and private airports, waiting by a set of swings felt surreal. He wiped his palms against his jeans, so uncharacteristic for someone who usually carried himself like he owned every room. Today, the only question was whether three children would even want to know him. The park was alive with laughter and shouts, but Nathan only heard one sound: the children's voices. He spotted them near the slide, playing with the kind of easy joy that money couldn't buy. His breath caught. Caleb, bold and confident, was already guiding his siblings, steadying their hands as they climbed. Cameron moved slowly, deliberate and cautious, his small brows furrowed in thought even as he played. Chloe was pure energy, fearless as she launched herself down the slide and landed with a squeal. Destiny sat nearby at a picnic table, her sundress catching the sunlight. She looked different than he remembered, not just older, but stronger, as though the years had carved resilience into her. She noticed him watching and gestured for him to come closer. When the children ran over, they looked at him with the seriousness only toddlers can summon. They studied his face as though trying to fit it into a puzzle they didn't yet understand. "Do you remember Mr. Nathan from the airport?" Destiny asked gently. Chloe squinted and pointed. The tall man. That was when Destiny said the words that shifted all of their lives. "Hez your daddy." For a moment, the world went still. Nathan's chest tightened. He wanted to scoop them into his arms, to tell them he was sorry for the years gone, but he stayed on his knees at their level, waiting. Caleb's voice broke the silence. "Our daddy?" He sounded both confused and curious, as though testing how the idea fit in his mouth. Destiny softened the truth. She explained he had been away for work, but now he wanted to know them. It wasn't the whole story, but it was gentle, and Nathan was grateful. When Cameron asked in a quiet, cautious tone if they had to call him Daddy, Nathan shook his head. "Call me whatever feels right," he said. "Well, take our time." Chloe was the first to cross the invisible line between stranger and family. She patted his arm with small fingers and announced, "You're really tall." Nathan laughed, rusty from years of boardroom formality. "And you're really small." Her giggle rang like a bell, and just like that, the ice broke. Within minutes, he was pushing swings, stumbling through tag, and realizing that fatherhood wasn't about grand speeches, it was about being there. The first visit ended with something Nathan had never expected longing. He had sat through countless high-stakes negotiations, but never had he felt so desperate as when Chloe asked, "Can we see Mr. Nathan again?" When Destiny agreed, his heart soared in a way that no stock price had ever made it. All week, he prepared. His assistant was baffled when he canceled meetings to read parenting books. He watched hours of child development videos and even signed up for a co-parenting course that left him humbled. He had mastered global finance, yet cutting sandwiches into triangles or squares suddenly felt like a test he could fail. By the second Saturday, he was armed with toys he had carefully researched. Blocks for Caleb, who loved building. Puzzle sets for Cameron, who thrived on figuring things out. Markers and paper for Chloe, who was already showing an artistic streak. The children's eyes lit up when they saw the new treasures, and Nathan felt like he had just closed the most important deal of his life. They played for hours. Caleb chattered about dragons and knights. Cameron explained how toy cars worked with more seriousness than most engineers Nathan knew. Chloe climbed on his back, declaring herself queen of the jungle gym. For a man who once thought joy came from luxury yachts, the truth was, dawning joy was sticky fingers tugging on your sleeve, calling you into their world. When lunchtime arrived, Nathan watched in awe as Destiny turned a diaper bag into a five-star kitchen. Each sandwich cut to each child's preference, each juice box distributed like clockwork. It was a choreography of motherhood he couldn't hope to match. But when she handed him the goldfish crackers task precisely counted and arranged differently for each child, Nathan executed it with the focus of a CEO. When all three kids thanked him, his chest swelled. It was such a small thing, but in his heart, it felt enormous. That afternoon, Chloe climbed into his lap without invitation, her head resting against his chest. Nathan froze, overwhelmed by the warmth of her small body against his own. She trusted him enough to rest there. He caught Destiny watching, her expression softening for the first time. "Tell me about them," he whispered. And as she described Caleb the protector, Cameron the thinker, and Chloe the fearless spirit, Nathan realized something profound. These weren't just children. They were pieces of his heart he hadn't known were missing. What began as weekly park visits soon grew into something larger. Destiny laid down her terms if he was serious. The children needed consistency. That meant dinners during the week, routines they could depend on. For a man who once lived by the rhythms of quarterly earnings, Nathan's new calendar filled with spaghetti nights, bath time chaos, and story hours, and he embraced it without hesitation. On Tuesday evenings, his phone went dark by 5. He walked through Destiny's front door with groceries in hand, sleeves rolled up, ready to cook. The children met him at the door with shrieks of excitement, bombarding him with stories about daycare. He found himself genuinely fascinated by tales of playground politics, tower-building contests, and new crayons. Spaghetti dinners became their ritual. Caleb always wanted to stir. Cameron carefully counted meatballs to ensure fairness, and Chloe demanded to be the head taste tester. Nathan learned quickly that dinner time wasn't about food. It was about presence, about listening, about making space for every voice at the table. Thursday nights brought blanket forts. The living room transformed into a kingdom of cushions, flashlights, and whispered secrets. Inside those forts, Nathan wove stories tailored for each child, tales of a brave knight named Caleb, a brilliant inventor named Cameron, and a fearless princess named Chloe. Their eyes sparkled as they saw themselves as heroes, and Nathan felt something he hadn't in years, pure pride. For the first time, his life wasn't defined by what he could buy, but by what he could give. And as Caleb asked one night, "When will you be our real daddy?" Nathan realized the children weren't just opening the door. They were inviting him in to stay. As the weeks turned into months, Nathan's transformation became impossible to ignore. His board of directors, once accustomed to late-night calls and relentless schedules, now found their CEO unavailable after 5 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For the first time, Nathan began drawing lines between work and life. His empire didn't crumble. In fact, it ran more smoothly than he expected, proof that maybe he hadn't needed to control every detail all along. But more important than quarterly results were the small wins happening in living rooms and kitchens. Caleb proudly demonstrated how high he could jump from the couch, and Nathan caught him every single time. Cameron brought broken toys to Nathan with the solemnity of a scientist, demanding explanations for why they worked or failed. And Chloe, covered in flour from head to toe, insisted she was his assistant chef, even if all she really did was taste test ingredients. Destiny watched carefully. She wasn't just evaluating him as a father, she was guarding her children's hearts. She had raised them on her own, through sleepless nights and endless questions. She couldn't afford for Nathan to appear only to vanish again. So when she saw him crouched on the floor in a suit, tying shoelaces while whispering encouragements, or when she overheard him explaining gently to Cameron that it was okay to be afraid sometimes, her own heart began to soften against her will. Nathan had once believed that power came from commanding boardrooms. Now, power meant something far humbler. 3 small voices calling his name, 3 pairs of arms wrapping around his neck, 3 children who saw him not as a billionaire, but as daddy. The summer sun was golden the day the conversation finally shifted. They had gathered for another Saturday picnic under the shade of an oak tree. The children darted back and forth, laughing, chasing bubbles, and showing Nathan every treasure they collected from the grass. Destiny and Nathan sat together on the blanket, their laughter mingling with their children's joy. It was then Destiny admitted something she had been wrestling with. "You've changed," she said quietly. "You're not the same man you were when we left." Nathan looked at her, not sure if he should respond, not sure if it was a test. She continued, "I used to think you cared more about profits than people. But now I see you counting goldfish crackers, telling bedtime stories, and putting them before everything else. And I can't ignore it." Nathan's heart hammered. He wanted to tell her everything, how empty his mansion had been, how every award felt meaningless, how seeing Chloe rest her head on his chest had given him more joy than any deal. Instead, he chose honesty. "I never stopped loving you," he confessed, "but I didn't know how to show it. I thought building an empire would make me worthy. I was wrong. They're what makes me worthy. You're what makes me worthy." Destiny didn't answer immediately. She turned her gaze to the children, who were now building a crooked tower of twigs and rocks. "Maybe," she whispered, "we both needed time to grow." The children, of course, cut through the hesitation with blunt innocence. "Are you and Daddy going to get married again?" Caleb blurted. Both adults froze, but their faces betrayed something more longing. That night, Nathan lay awake in his now child-friendly house, the question echoing in his mind. He had always been bold in business, fearless in risk-taking. Maybe it was time to take the biggest risk of his life, not in stocks, but in love. Unlike his first marriage proposal, which had been rushed and showy in an expensive restaurant, Nathan wanted this one to mean something. He enlisted Destiny's sister, Rachel, to help. Together, they planned a picnic at the same Santa Monica park where Nathan had first met the Triplets. But this time, the blanket would hold more than sandwiches and juice boxes. It would hold the promise of a family united. When the day came, Nathan prepared carefully. He set out Destiny's favorite foods, gathered flowers from her own garden, and brought a playlist of songs that reminded him of their early years together. When Destiny arrived, she looked surprised. "This is fancy for a picnic," she said. Nathan only smiled. Today needs to be special. They sat together, watching the children play. The moment was already charged when Destiny said softly, "I've been thinking about us, not just as parents, as us." Nathan's breath caught. She admitted she had wondered whether they could make it work again. That was all he needed. With his heart pounding, Nathan called the children over. He wanted them to be part of it. "Caleb, Cameron, Chloe," he said, his voice shaking. "I love being your daddy. And I love your mama. Would you like it if I asked her to marry me so we could all be together?" Chloe squealed. "Yes." Cameron asked if Nathan would still read them stories every night. Caleb just grinned, already imagining life together. Nathan turned to Destiny, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was not a massive diamond, but a simple band with 3 stones, each representing one of their children. "Destiny Williams," he said, "will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you and our children deserve?" Tears filled Destiny's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, with certainty, "Yes." The children cheered, showering them with hugs. It wasn't just a proposal. It was the beginning of healing. 6 months later, under strings of lights in their new backyard, Nathan and Destiny stood side by side once more. This time, their vows weren't about promises of wealth or ambition. They were about family. The Triplets stole the show. Chloe twirled down the aisle, scattering rose petals in her sparkly pink dress. Caleb and Cameron marched solemnly as ring-bearers, their small faces serious with pride. The guests laughed, some wiping away tears, as the children loudly declared, "Now kiss," after the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. The reception wasn't filled with billionaires or celebrities. Instead, it was filled with laughter, cake smudges, and children running barefoot in the grass. Destiny's catering team handled the food. The Triplets chose the music, and Nathan couldn't remember ever being happier. He had thrown lavish parties before, but none of them held the magic of his daughter dancing with her father, her brothers clapping in rhythm, her mother smiling as if she'd never stopped loving him. That night, as the children fell asleep in their new rooms, Nathan realized something profound. He had always thought the word home meant square footage and luxury. Now he knew better. Home was the sound of 3 small voices calling for him in the dark. For years, Nathan had been defined by his relentless pursuit of growth. Growth charts, expansion plans, mergers. Now his metrics had shifted. Success was measured in bedtime stories, Saturday morning pancakes, and being there for every recital, every scraped knee, every whispered "Daddy, I need you." His board was baffled when he relocated permanently to Los Angeles. They were even more shocked when he stepped back, handing control of daily operations to a trusted team. To them, it looked like he was abandoning ambition. To Nathan, it was the smartest deal of his life. Destiny's catering business flourished with his support. Together, they opened new locations. But more importantly, they created a company that brought joy to families. Nathan had gone from building empires of steel to nurturing businesses built on love. For once, profit wasn't about domination. It was about meaning. At night, when the children asked for stories, Nathan created tales about brave knights, clever inventors, and fearless princesses. The heroes were always named Caleb, Cameron, and Chloe. And sometimes, when he caught Destiny listening quietly in the doorway, he added a queen wise, strong, and beautiful. A year after that first meeting in the park, the triplets turned 6. Their birthday party wasn't held in a banquet hall, but in the same restaurant where Nathan had once thought only of business. This time, the room was decorated with balloons, streamers, and 3 cakes. Each child had chosen their own flavor chocolate for Caleb, vanilla for Cameron, strawberry for Chloe. Nathan gave a short speech, his voice breaking. "A year ago, I thought I had everything. But I had nothing without them. Today, my children taught me what real success looks like. It looks like love. It looks like family." The triplets wrapped their arms around him, and Destiny smiled, her eyes shining with pride. For the first time in his life, Nathan knew what it meant to be truly wealthy. Not because of billions, but because of the love of 3 small children and the woman he had found his way back to. That evening, as the sun set, the family stepped outside and watched a light show Nathan had arranged in the sky. The children gasped in wonder. "It's magic," Chloe whispered. "Like our family," Sophie added. Nathan looked at them, his heart full. He had built empires and won every deal, but nothing compared to this. This love, this family, this fortune that no money could ever buy.